state Supreme Court held its session today in a virtual format. At issue is whether Governor Evers and his administration lack the authority to extend the Safer at Home order until May 26th. Lawmakers did not object to the original Safer at Home order, which expired April 24th, but brought the suit when the governor extended it for another month. The attorney for the Evers administration argued that if the court blocks the extension, it would put lives and health at risk with no vaccine and no treatment available. The attorney for Republican lawmakers who brought the suit say the issue is not whether the lockdown is a good idea, but whether state law allows the governor and his top health officials to close down daily life without allowing lawmakers to have their say. The 7 justices, they had the chance to ask questions of the attorneys. Justice Walsh Bradley asked about the impact of striking down the order, while Justice Annette Ziegler pointed out that the justices must rule on the legality of the order regardless of whether they agree with it.
Part of the problem we have is we may personally think things make sense, but we have to apply constitutional principles and the language of the statute and the law to figure out whether it actually does make sense.
I asked if this court, because of the lawsuit brought by the Wisconsin legislature, would invalidate 28 and leave nothing in its place, kind of flip the switch, so to speak. What kind of ramifications or chaos would result?
No word on when a ruling might come. News 19's Mike Biermeister joins us now, and he has some insight into what happens once the Supreme Court does rule. Mike?
Yeah, Scott, if the Supreme Court sides with Governor Evers' legal team, then of course the order will stay in place. But if they side with Republicans, there could be some things that we could see happen within the next couple of weeks. And I was able to speak with local attorney Joe Veenstra of Johns, Flaherty, and Collins about what we could see unfold over the next few weeks. And here's what he had to say.
It would have to go through a traditional administrative rule type of analysis, and it would be a slower process to get that power, rulemaking power created. You know, what exactly the rules were would be argued a lot more through the legislature.
And one other item that Veenstra noted, that if the court rules that Secretary-designee Andrea Palm didn't have the power to make that decision, individual counties could have the right to create their own individual rules in response to the pandemic. And we're already seeing some aspects of that with county sheriffs deciding whether or not to enforce the Safer at Home order. But Scott, still no word yet. We haven't seen any decision made. We'll keep you up to date once that happens. So I'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Now, if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the legislature, the two sides would have to agree on new emergency rules.